stronger together.
Is America greater? Is America greater today? What are your thoughts on that one?
Greater. Greater than yesterday, greater than other countries, greater than our brothers and sisters who have less than us. America is built on capitalism, and basically trying to find ways to be greater. I think that is the whole concept. Aside from the freedoms that we are given here, and some of those freedoms have been in question for years and even to this day. So I mean, it's such a vague question. Greater, and I can't help but think of that little triangle. Where the wide side is facing the greater, to think the theology, it's about the least of us. Jesus said to get into the kingdom of heaven, we must be like little children. And one thing about children, I mean, it's not a contest of trying to get more. But as far as what's going on socially, I just got a little deep. I'm sorry. I think that I think we're working towards something. The creed of this country, not the things that were dead wrong that needed fixing, and there's some things that are still wrong, but the actual creed. I think it was a lot of strength into it. There's a lot of strength into it where, we had people like, that came before us, like Martin Luther King, who really, almost called the bluff of the United States. Like, this is what you wrote. This is the Bible that you follow. And, these things are happening. So for the most part, I think a lot of those things have, it hasn't been as bad as it was. It's getting better. I think groups like us, it's our job to point out those things and hopefully find ways to fix them,
To piggyback a little bit, when you say find ways to fix it, and also you bring up the word creed, my thought comes to when you ask the question of greater, I think that one of the biggest sins in our world is when the feeling that one is better or is one is better than another or others. And with that ideology, it causes our communities and our world to act as if, one is better than another, which in all, like, that's not a healthy mindset for humans. As humans being made in the image of God, I think that one of the biggest things that we need in our world is a standard for humanity, a standard that says, okay, all people, regardless of who they are, what their background is, have, because they're made in the image of God, our bodies and our very beings become sacred to the point where we don't inflict violence on one another, whether it be physically, and then even starting physically, but then it grows even deeper because, you can inflict violence on someone by mentally, emotionally, spiritually, in so many other ways. And as a Christian woman and a leader in the gospel, we see a lot of violence in our Bible, which is why a lot of people are very confused in their own spirituality as Christians. So I think that we really gotta look at humanity and look at how things were from, and I speak from a Christian perspective because I'm Christian. If we go back, and I'm sorry for the birds in the background, before there was killing, Adam, Cain, and Abel, before there was disobedience from God, everything was good and perfect. And I think in order for humanity to be restored to that place, we have to see God in one another, that in our responding to each other, we don't inflict, we don't think of ourselves as greater or better than the other, but we see our neighbors, or we see other people as our neighbors, which, we have a long way to go, because for our societies and our world to take on that type of ideology, I don't really know if that's what people are calling socialism. I don't know what you call that, but at the end of the day, I'm not talking about political terminologies as far as, Jay, you mentioned capitalism, but I'm talking about the ideology of human life and worth. And as us being humans and being able to rationalize, there's something really important about awakening that part of our brain so that we don't continue to act like animals and perish like beasts.
I want to jump in right there.
Here.
That word greater, as you was explaining it, and, is it great? What are we comparing it to? Are we comparing it to a different time? Are we comparing it to a different country? Because to me, that is opposite from the plight of just considering humanity, and humanity and justice for all people, and love and care and apathy for all people. I was coming into my parsonage today, and a homeless woman stopped me to have a conversation with me about the clothing that she had received from the YMCA. And as I'm talking to this woman who stopped me in my tracks, to let me know, how she was feeling and what she was suffering from, I couldn't help but to think in the back of my mind, the systems, her life plight, the journey that has brought her to where she is today. And when I think about, we can't ignore the statistics, right? We have high numbers in mass incarceration, high numbers in homeless population, high numbers in poverty when it comes to people of color and people who have been traditionally oppressed in this country. When I think of Make America Great or Greater, I'm thinking, what is America doing to right its wrongs to those it has inflicted in the past, especially because we're a democracy, especially because our Constitution says that we have the freedom to the pursuit of happiness for every single citizen. But when I think of, the privilege that Tom was talking about earlier, and how power must hold on to itself. I don't think any nation can be great when you have a large number of people still suffering because of the nation's crimes. And I do think that it takes leadership, community leaderships, people speaking out, people coming together, people putting light on these places of evil, on these systemic processes of evil that keep people in bondage, in order for America to, really become good. And I'm not saying that America is not good now. I'm saying that when I think of a community of people that are unjustly poor, that are unjustly in bondage, that are unjustly suffering because of the crimes of our nation, that needs to be rethought. And I do love our country. I've been to many different countries all over this world, and I'm always very anxious to come home. And I'm always appreciating home. I do love all that we have to offer. But as a leader, my heart goes out to using what we have to offer to bring justice to those places that have been unjust, and those populations of people that are suffering still from that unjust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true, very true, Crystal. I'm the oldest person on this committee by a generation, and you may recall when Tom Brokaw wrote a book called The Greatest Generation. He's talking about my parents, and I've wondered for years what they're going to say, what the verdict is going to be on my generation of white people, in effect, because there's a case being made today that the protests and things that are going on are making us worse. And I say, no. We're shining a light, finally, into the darkness and bringing things to the forefront that have been going on for generations, going back almost to the founding of this nation. And it's time to face up to these facts, white America, frankly. And that's how I see that. And I was struck by something, I think it was Valerie just said, when she said we need to see God in one another. I thought, add that to the list. Add that to the list, Crystal, right up front about the various things that we stand for. Okay, thanks.
You know, I agree with you, Tom. And one of the things that I see happening now that I think is positive is that we are beginning the difficult process of separating white supremacist male patriarchal culture from the gospel and from our democracy.
Amen.
And for so long, when I grew up, it was just a given. It was, as they say, what we were swimming in. It never occurred. If you asked me if it was wrong for white people to think that they were better, I would have said, yeah. But when I went to church, and okay, my father was the pastor of our church, and he was not, I would say that I didn't see it there, but it was a white church, and it was just a given. And still to this day, I see my friends who are still in those churches really struggling with taking away what the white supremacist culture from a reading of the gospel, which is in many ways the opposite. And it's frightening to me how Jesus came to say, stop with taking God's love and turning it into a rigid series of laws and who's in charge and who's not, and who's worthy and who's not, and do it about love. And then, of course, he was crucified, and we did the same thing all over again. And here we are. So as a white person, I am knowing that it is especially part of my and Tom's responsibility to talk to the people who are where we were, because we understand it, and we can do it from a position of love. Except right now in this country, division is being sown, and purposefully sown, and people are, honest to God, people are telling my fellow Christians that people who are not on their side politically are actively engaging in selling children. And I mean, you think of any of the worst possible things that can happen in the world and how you make people afraid of other people, and then you tell them that that's what's true. And it's very difficult to counter that when the difference between truth and facts doesn't seem to make a difference to some people. So I am hoping that we'll get to a place where where truth matters, and that we can deal with each other in love and in truth and have it make a difference.
Great, Sharon. Great.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in right here?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I look at this slogan that "Make America Great Again" by Trump, and Sharon, it's interesting because, you know, we want for us to all get to a place where we realize that, you know, it's about love and it's about us loving each other. And we also know that these are not new under the sun. Reagan used the words, make America great again. And he also used fear tactics to separate. And I know it's sensitive, but a lot of black men got arrested. And when Crystal, you talk about the statistics, throughout history, we've seen the historical oppression of black bodies, and at the expense, folks get rich at the expense of somebody else's body. And it's like, we have to, as a whole entire body, not just recognize that, it's about love. It's also about systematically breaking those things that comply with the old way. Because when you think about it, 80 years ago, 100 years ago, the ideology in grandpa's mind has not been shifted in systematically. It hasn't systematically been, the one who hated others and considered others outsiders and considered themselves to be higher than others. There was no deconstructing of the mindset. That's why it keeps on awakening in the United States. And that's why this president is able to do this, to stoke fires of fear in people. Today I had one of my members tell me that him and his son are going to go and shoot rifles. And in my heart, I know he's just talking, but in my mind, I'm going, Lord, help us. Because this is not something that hasn't happened before. We've seen hatred stoked up and more bodies put under oppression. And we're in a time right now with this COVID where it's so much and it's so fast. You're telling me 190,000 bodies in the last few months, and in February, he can say that he knew?
Right.
We're not counting up that every person is a soul that's crying back out to God, just like Abel's blood did. It's not crying back out saying, hey, something could have stopped this. I feel like we as a people have to choose to have these conversations, no matter how hard they are, and because it's a life every time we choose not to.
Wendy, some people don't know what you mean when you say he can say that he knew. So explain that.
Yesterday in the news, our president spoke in February the 3rd to a reporter, telling him that he knew that it was deadly, telling him that he knew that it was airborne, that
the coronavirus.
People would get it. He knew all about it. And I think about my church members and my friends on Facebook. Yesterday, my childhood best friend called me and told me her father is gone, and he shouldn't be gone. And I know so many stories like that. And it's like, other people, I've had some conversations with other people on the other side of the fence who have said, my great grandmother got COVID. The guy who I was talking about earlier, he said his mother and father, they're in their 90s. They got it. They got some medication. They got better. But frontliners and people who are vulnerable have had difficulty fighting this off. And I've seen about, I don't know how many people who have passed away from COVID, and they're people of color.
And I just want to say something to what you said, Wendy. It really hit home. I don't want to go backwards, but I just want to say this. There was a dismantling of horrible beliefs in Germany. It was a complete dismantling. They went to war. They rode in the tanks, and they, there's wars in the Bible to where God instructed to just destroy generations. Gut them out, and it sounds horrible.
Right.
But it was completely gutted out. And in our country, and this really hurts my heart. It was folks like Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, even Malcolm in his way, John F. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, and even in their politics, it's almost like the good was gutted out. The change was gutted out, and it sucks. It hurts my heart. And now I know we went to, people always say, you know, well, we had the Civil War in the country. Yes, we did. And you know, that was what it was. But there was change that needed to happen. And instead of like real change happening, people were cut short. Lives were cut short. And I don't want to go backwards, like I said, but I just wanted to say that. And I like to what you said, Crystal, I really believe that it is something that we all recognize. And Wendy, you went back and said something about love that Sharon said. Now, and I just gotta, you know, knit the two together. It is love. It is love when we recognize these things. It is love when we go back and we fix this as a country. That is love.
I think we have the love. I think it's there. And I think that we could probably even get enough people together to love, to do that. My concern is that the power that operates our country is about money. And we have these systems and structures in place because of money. Someone makes money off the backs of any incarcerated person. I mean, I have the numbers are like through the roof. I want to say $750,000 a year. And you put people in these places that are inhumane, and you bring in all these professionals and you put out all of this money. You know, when you use, you know, a lot has changed, but a lot hasn't changed because the system just keeps changing to continue to keep people in bondage. But the purpose of it is because somebody is gaining what they would call a mighty dollar. And another reason why, you know, it's in some people's best interest to keep people divided is because, you know, and I don't want to call people out because I don't want to be a target, but the truth is there is an elite. There's a 1% that makes more money than all of us poor people all together. And I often wonder, what do they think? What is their best America? What does America look like? Is it possible that we can get to a place where we can be humane and we can look at all people as made in the image of God, and we stop and cease from killing and using violence against people, and we consider the people living in areas that are polluted and killing and continue to harm them in their bodies. I mean, the numbers are ridiculous. It's like the lifespan is like over 20 years if you live in certain districts. So I think that I'm of the belief, or I should say hope, that there is a possibility and a way to get there where we don't have to continue to destroy humanity, because I believe that what goes out comes back. And for the sake of moving humanity to, I want to say like to a higher place for the greater good, love will do it. And I believe that there's enough love on this earth to do it. I mean, the fact that we all come together and we all come from different backgrounds, but I'm wondering if the people really have the power to do it based on the fact that somebody is making money off of somebody's black body or somebody's brown body, you know, like these children that are missing or whatever. Somebody's making money off of this, and that's another form of violence. And how do we live in a capitalist society and assure ourselves that people get the level of care that God would give for God's own son or daughter?
We have about 5 more minutes. I'm going to say something to that, and then we want to hear from Sharon and if Tom has any last words. But Valerie, you are absolutely right, and that is one of the systemic issues of our country that started with capitalism, started with slavery, that must be uprooted. I was on a call last night with my church, and it was an anti-racism group. We're reading a book called The Bridge, and we were discussing, who's responsible. One of the things that came up was, who's responsible to make the change? Who's responsible to bring the change? And I am, again, a strong believer that, first of all, justice is love in public. Dr. Westfield said that in one of the texts that I read while I was at Drew Seminary last year, that justice is love acted out in public. And you know who's responsible? The one that's going to be the good Samaritan that Jesus talked about, the one that's going to, see Lazarus at the gate and stop and say, Lazarus, you do deserve more than my crumbs. And Valerie, you just said something very key, that 10%. My issue with the 10% of those who have the most wealth in this country is the people making sure that that 10% is not controlling the country. So there is a way to strip that 10% or that 1% or whatever percentage it is, please correct me, you guys, from the power 1%. To control, because our Constitution says that every citizen has a right to the pursuit of happiness, and those in public office take an oath to uphold that Constitution. So if the Constitution and the oaths are not being honored, then the people in places of power that do have the say so, when it comes to the majority, and especially the least of these, they need to be removed from those positions because they're not upholding their oath of office. And who can remove them? That's us. And it's not only our voting for our president, but it's also our voting for the judges and those in local offices as well. But we have to know, and not just we as pastors and we as leaders, but we have to also instill the knowing into those who we come across, that it is our responsibility as a community to make sure that people who hold the power of office are in there, they're speaking for the whole community and not just the 1%. That's key.
Well, and I will agree with what you've said. I will say one thing that I think is better about where we are now is that those of us who were taught to be nice and be quiet have found out that being good is more important than being nice. I think that as a journalist and as a writer, I'm especially appalled at the way that non-truths are being peddled, the way that the 1% is very smart. And they know how to keep people in fear, and they know how to keep people in line, and they are very organized. And I think the rest of us have come to the realization that the only way to fight that is to become organized back. And it's not comfortable, and it takes us away from things that we want to do. And you know what? I'm not completely sure that pursuing happiness is the best way to a joyful life. I'm just saying that. I'm saying let's pursue justice and see if happiness doesn't come along behind the next day.
Amen.
All right. Very good. Hey, I want to jump in and just make one quick point. I believe that was Martin Luther King who said the arc of history bends towards justice. And there is a demographic bend coming that most people are not aware of, and that's the fact that apparently demographically this deal is already done, that in another 30 years, whites go from majority to plurality, okay? And another 20 years after that, in 2070, whites go from plurality to minority. So things are bending in a certain direction, and I'm not going to live to see it. Your children are, and I've thought about that for little white kids, grandchildren. So it's going to be a different world by the time they're my age, that's for sure. So things are heading in that direction, and we, I think, are part of an introduction that is not going to stop. We are going to be headed in this direction, and like our own bishop has said, if he boiled the gospel down to just a few words, it was love God and love one another. Crystal?
Amen.
Amen. That concludes our discussion for today. We're going to have more of these discussions, and we're looking for topics of suggestions, and we're looking for questions, and we're looking for comments that you want to add to these discussions. But we'll be back. The Harmony Conference.
I am for harmony.
I'm for harmony.
I am for harmony.
I am for harmony. Yes.
I am for harmony.
I am for harmony. I am for harmony.
I'm here harmony. I'm here harmony.
We are for harmony.
We are for harmony.
Harmony. Stronger together.